I'm going to start with our raw file. I'm not going to get into the shoot raw versus shoot JPEG argument. To me, it's basic. You have a lot more information in the raw and a lot more flexibility in a raw file. And you get to choose the settings to convert the file into a working file using any of the software available. If you shoot JPEG, then you don't have that option. Now, the softwares available for converting a raw file are Lightroom is the most popular one, and I think it's because it's very user-friendly and it's not as complete as Camera Raw, but it gets you there. The other two popular options are Camera Raw and Capture One. They have similar settings. Camera Raw is actually a lot more complete, but I prefer to use Capture One because I think it has a better understanding of color. As you all know, a raw file is actually a black and white file. It contains color information, but nothing similar to what the eye or the brain or a camera sees as color. So it's the raw processor's job to assign a color, and I think Capture One by default makes a better choice when selecting the colors, especially for skin tones. Today we are going to use Camera Raw because it's the default software that comes with Photoshop, but I would suggest, as a personal thing, to download the trial of Capture One and try it out for yourselves. Now, before even opening the image in Photoshop, we should already know where we are going to take it. It's not a trial and error kind of thing. I already know that I need to match the skin tones from the face to the skin tones of the body, that I want more detail out of the eyes and more detail out of the hair. So it's practically impossible to get all that from a single conversion, so I usually make a couple of conversions from the same raw file. Now, this would be a very good time to use smart objects, but since I don't use them a lot, I'm not gonna use them on this DVD. I don't know them enough to explain them to you, and it's a whole complete subject on its own. I should make a DVD only for smart objects, so I promise myself not to use them. I'm gonna make several conversions in different files and then merge them in Photoshop. That's what I usually do. I make different conversions from the different areas of the image. In this case, it would be eyes, face, body, and hair. These are the elements that need separate treatment on this image. In another image, it might be makeup, skin, and clothing or accessories. So the important thing is that you need to look at the image and understand that the image has separate elements that need to be treated separately. So the first conversion that I'm going to do is the one for the body. Now I can see there's a little green in the shadows, and I want to fix that without getting an orange tint. So I'm gonna go right ahead and explain a little bit of the labels to you, especially the things that confused me when I was starting out. For example, exposure and brightness. Most people treat exposure and brightness like it's the same thing, and it's not. Exposure lights the image, but based on the middle of the highlights. So this. So the changes you make through exposure are a lot more subtle than the ones you make with brightness, because brightness lightens the middle tones. and it's more likely to ruin an image with brightness than with exposure. So my advice is to first adjust the exposure, and only if it's necessary, move the brightness slider. Now, a similar thing is between contrast and the curves. With contrast, you are adjusting the contrast in the middle tones, so it affects the whole image. Now, when working on the curve, you get to choose where you want to enhance the contrast. If you want to increase highlights or decrease highlights, lights, darks, and shadows. So you get more flexibility in contrast. Now, another thing is vibrance and saturation. This file is a very good example because we have more saturation in the cheek than in the rest of the skin. So here we can see the difference. Vibrance, what it does, it focuses on the low saturated tones and the oversaturated tones, not the mid tones. Saturation increases or decreases saturations in all the tones at the same time. So if we move the slider of saturation, we can go from less 100, a completely desaturated image, to plus 100, a completely saturated image. All the tones in the same way. Now, vibrance, if we move the slider to the left, we're gonna desaturate the oversaturated tones, and the mid tones are going to remain almost the same. You see, the oversaturation of the cheek is gone, but the rest of the tones remain almost the same. The same happens if we move the slider to the right. It's gonna saturate the undersaturated tones, but the oversaturated tones are going to remain the same. If we did this kind of adjustment with the saturation, it would saturate all the tones in the same manner. So for this conversion, I'm gonna use a little bit of vibrance to decrease this saturation that's oversaturated in the shadows, and now I'm gonna increase the saturation generally so I don't get a desaturated skin tones. This is gonna make the tones a lot more even. And now I'm gonna use curves to increase the contrast, but I'm gonna leave the highlights as they are because we have very strong highlights. So I'm just gonna increase the contrast by pushing lights and darks, not shadows either, because the shadows are deep enough. Increasing the contrast always saturates the image more. So I'm going to decrease a little bit more. There we go. And to get rid of the greens in the shadows, I'm going to use something called split toning. With split toning, you can change the hue and the saturation of the highlights and the shadows separately. What this means is that you can have really warm, orangey, yellowish, red shadows and really blue, really cold highlights at the same time in the same image. This gives me the opportunity to show something to you. It's a very popular request that people ask for cross-process techniques, that kind of dreamy images that seem really warm and really weird in toning, like they have a lot of contrast but they don't have a lot of contrast at the same time, and all the shadows are kind of blue. So I'm going to show you that you can get to that look with split toning. If we push the shadows to violet blue and we increase the saturation, I'm going to do it a lot so you can really see the difference. And then you push the highlights in a complete different way. Let's do it a little more yellow. We start to get the feel that those images have. Usually the blacks of those images are not so strong, so I would reduce the blacks of the entire image. I'm not going to do it to this image, but this was just something I wanted to show you, that what can be done if you push the split toning to extremes. And it's very interesting to deal with highlights and skin tones, but not for this image. So we're gonna go back. In this image I just want to get some green out of the shadows, so I'm gonna push the shadows to red, but I'm gonna push the highlights to blue again, so I don't get an orange tint over the entire picture. I did like the blue highlights. As soon as I saw the image, I knew that the skin tones were going to be really warm to contrast with the blue of the background, the eyes, and the highlights. I thought that would give a very interesting look. So I'm gonna push the tint to magenta so it's not so green. And remember, I'm not looking at the face. I don't care that I lost color in the eyelids. I don't care that the face has too much contrast. Why? Because I'm gonna use a different conversion altogether for the face and another one for the eyes. So now I get to concentrate only on this. I'm gonna increase the clarity. What the clarity slider is basically to increase local contrast. It's kind of an unsharp mask in high settings. What it does, it takes the edges of the texture, the big edges, not the little edges like pores or hairs, like the big edges of the image, and increases the contrast there. So we can make a really huge. See, it's not usually very good for beauty because every flaw is gonna get really sharp too. So we're just gonna use it a little bit for our shoulder and body area. So I can push a little bit the drops. I'm gonna push them even further when I sharpen the image as a final step in Photoshop. As a final step, because I'm not even going to touch the detail level in Camera Raw, because since I'm gonna be working on texture and skin in Photoshop, I don't want anything to be sharper than the original image. I can always add focus before, afterwards, but if I sharpen the image now, then I'm gonna have more work when it comes to healing and dodging and burning the details. So I would suggest not to do anything here and just sharpen the image in the end. Now, once I get tones that I like and the contrast how I like it in the body, now I'm gonna check the workflow options. Now, about color space, this is my take on the subject. Adobe RGB, I don't recommend it for anything. Now, Pro photo is the one with higher range of colors. It's the one that has more colors, but it's also the more risky one. If you're working with someone who doesn't understand color profiles, then do not use Pro Photo because it's more likely for them to ruin it. And Color Match is the one that follows Pro Photo. It's not as big as Pro Photo, but it can create problems too. But if you're gonna do a CMYK conversion afterwards, then you need either Pro Photo or Color Match, because with sRGB you're gonna lose a lot of quality. Now, if you're working to publish the image on web, or if you know that you're working with a client that doesn't understand color at all, then my advice is to use sRGB. Because I don't print my own files and I don't usually convert to CMYK to deliver my files, then I usually use sRGB. Because I know that it's the less likely for people to ruin afterwards. Now, I always work in 16-bit channels. This is like the RAW versus JPEG argument. I'm not gonna get into this one either. Let's just say that I think 16-bit has a bigger range of color and luminosity, and you can really see that clearly if you do a gradient in an 8-bit file and the same gradient, white to black gradient on a 16-bit image. You have a lot more bits in the middle and it's gonna cause less banding. And banding is something you want to avoid at all costs. We don't touch this, and in this case I'm gonna push the resolution a little bit because I need to work on 300 dpi's always, because most of my calculations in Photoshop are based on 300 pixels dpi images. So I'm not gonna open as smart objects. I click OK. And now that I'm happy with the first conversion, I'm gonna open the image. Very good. So now we have our first conversion. We're gonna do the second one. We're gonna reopen the file, open recent, and we go to the same image. Now we're gonna reset to camera raw defaults, but before I do that, in case this is not just one image and we're working on a full story, then we need to save our settings for this image to later on apply it on all of the images. So what do? We go to this menu over here, we make it appear, and then we go to Save Settings. And it's going to ask us, what settings do I want to save? So we select all of them, so all the settings except the auto settings, and we click Save. So it's going to ask us how do we going to call this setting. So we're going to call it Basic Conversion or Conversion 1, or however you want to call it, or just Basic. And you save it in a folder where you have your image. So we save this conversion so we can later on apply it to the whole set of images. Let's try that out. So we're gonna go to the camera raw defaults and we're gonna lower that setting that we just saved, Basic. We load it. Now we have the same conversion on the image, and we can do the same conversion over any image. And that's gonna save us a lot of time when processing a whole story. So now let's move on. Let's go to camera raw defaults, and now I'm gonna do the conversion of just the face. The face is a lot lighter and it's a lot cooler. So I'm gonna warm it up and I'm gonna make it darker and increase the contrast. I'm not going to touch the highlights because I think the highlights look fine. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to split toning again, and I'm going to push the highlights just a little bit, and the shadows, so I can get even warmer feel. This is okay. Okay. Okay, and now we have our second conversion. Let's save this one as face. We check this, the working is the same, and we open the image. Now I'm going to select this image, copy, and then paste it over my original conversion. We can close this, we don't need it anymore. And now I'm gonna open the image for the third time, and I'm gonna do the eye conversion. So I'm gonna take it back to the raw defaults, and I'm really going to push the contrast. I couldn't get this much detail out of the eye if I didn't use a separate conversion. And I really push the contrast and get all the detail I can. This is the only time I'm gonna use the sharpening, because I want even more detail, this texture of the eye. There we go. And when I'm happy, I open the third conversion. I do the same I did before. I select all, Command C to copy or Control C to copy in a PC, and paste Command V or Control V in a PC. Okay, and now I'm gonna mask out these two conversions. So let's name this eyes and this face, and we're gonna go to layer, layer mask, hide all. This is gonna create a black mask over my third conversion, and I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna select the face, I'm gonna create a layer mask to hide all, to create another black mask to hide it. Now I'm gonna do the third conversion, the one for the hair, but once I get to see how the rest of the image looks first. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna mask in the face. I'm just gonna paint white with a big soft brush over the face. Just really sloppy. This doesn't have to be perfect. Just painting over the face. go. I'm going to erase it from the arm. Because I don't want the darkness of the face on the already dark arm, so I paint black to hide the effect from the arm. It's easier to paint more than you should and then erase it than to try to make it perfect by painting inside the lines. So don't worry, just paint outside the line and then just erase it. It's easier. Okay, so and now I'm gonna mask in the eyes. So I select the eye mask, and with white I'm gonna paint in, not so much opacity. There we go. Let's zoom in to see. Now I'm using another view. I'm clicking Shift F. If you click Shift F, it keeps changing the way you see the screen. See? Gray background, before it was black background, and one more click on Shift F is gonna give you a separate window. So we click again until we get this, because we can zoom and move the image without any limits. So let's zoom in. To zoom in, I'm using Command plus on a Mac, and I'm guessing Control plus in a PC. Just scroll the mouse. And now I'm gonna paint the light back into this eye. The most important thing of this technique is to know that if you have the raw, then you can get a lot of detail from different areas of the image by processing, thinking of the different elements of this image. And you don't have to settle. That's the most important thing, flexibility. You don't need to settle with one conversion and lose detail in the shadows or lose detail in the highlights. I went a little bit too far. It's okay, I can just paint black. If you paint black on a mask, you hide. If you paint white on a mask, you show. Okay, so can you see that we have absolutely no detail in the hair? So we're gonna open the image again in Camera Raw. We're gonna go back to the raw settings, and we're gonna decrease the blacks, and we're going to push the shadows, because that's what we need. We need the shadow area. And don't worry about the rest of the face. Then to decrease the vibrance, because as you can see, we have a really saturated area and a really desaturated one. And there we go, and increase here. And now it's more even. Maybe we have some noise in the shadows, so we can go and fix that in the color noise reduction. There we go, and maybe a little bit, just a little bit. I don't usually use noise reduction from Camera Raw. There's a lot of plugins available to deal with noise more effectively. I'm not gonna name any because I could get sued. But for now, this is gonna be enough. So we make our third conversion. Let's name this hair. Remember, save settings. So we can apply them later to another image. Okay, we check the settings again and we open the image. And we do the same thing. We select all, Command C to copy, Control C in a PC, and Shift F to have separate windows. Command B to paste, Control B to paste in a PC. We close this, we don't need it anymore. And we're gonna mask it out. Layer mask, hide all again, and we paint it only where we need it. That is painting white on the black mask of our new sorry about that, of our new hair conversion. And we again Shift F to show the whole screen. I don't advise to use the black background because this is a personal choice, but it could mess with your eyes and the way you perceive contrast. So I would always advise to use the gray background. Oh, that's too much. And it's the hardness of the brush. Whenever you're masking several conversions, just use really soft brush so you don't do what I've been doing when it was hard. It doesn't have to be perfect because again we're working with, it's not like I brought another. Okay, check that you're painting on the mask and not the actual layer. Let's see our history and let's thank God that we have this. Cool. Let's set up workspace back to basics. Okay, so once that you know you're working on the mask, you paint with white to show the effect. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just need a little bit. It's too desaturated. I don't know if you can tell. We don't want that line. So let's paint with black to hide here. And since this layer is really desaturated, we're also going to use it where the saturation was too much, like in the shadows here. See, we can lighten the shadows a little bit and get rid of that extra saturation at the same time. So we can have more detail in the shadows and not so much saturation. Okay. There we go. And now we can see that this is going to be our working file. This was our original conversion and this is our working file now. And this is why I work on raw and only raw, and my advice is still get the best from the raw.